members by Commissioner Lang, Vice Chair Pouncil, Commissioner Patel, Vice Chair Thompson, and then online joined by Commissioner Spivak and Commissioner Routh. So our first item today is just for me to ask if there are any items of interest from commissioners. Okay. I'm not seeing any hands go up or indications for items. So transition now to see, Patricia, do you have a director's report for us this afternoon?
Good afternoon, commissioners. Good now? Just don't join with computer audio. Testing, is this okay? No, we're still having an issue. If you just don't join with computer audio at all, so, yeah, okay. Pardon, sorry, everyone. We just had some technical difficulty here, but we're working that out. So Patricia Diefendover for the record. I don't have a director's report today. I don't have any items to share today, so unless there are any questions from the commission, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Patricia. Moving on now to the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Commissioner Lang? Okay. Is there a second?
Commissioner Pouncil seconds the motion.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Pouncil. And all in favor? Aye.
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 The consent agenda is approved. We are now swiftly moving ahead to our main item for today, which is the Recap 10. Today is a work session, and I am pleased to welcome BPS staff, Sandra Wood, JP, and Shannon. Thank you.
Commissioners, okay, I think we're waiting for JP to come back with the, hopefully, computer.
I don't know if the problem's fixed yet. I was trying to shut down my computer, but.
And I do want to apologize to commission for my late arrival. I had some technical difficulties, but I'm here now.
I logged out.
And while we're in between, I'm going to have my video off for a few minutes because I'm eating soup. So thank
For
you.
folks online, we're just working out some technical details here. I do want to welcome Commissioner Alexander. I see that you've joined online, so we do have full commission attendance.
Down, but noises, so. It's a technical thing with my computer. I'm not really sure why it's doing it. We are. Start saying things. Oh, it was-
My computer's not linking. Why don't you just start refreshing our memory on where we are?
All right. Well, apologize for the technical issues. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm JP McNeil. I'm with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Today, I have with me Sandra Wood, our principal planner, and Shannon Buno, senior planner on the a member of the project team. So we are here today to provide you a brief refresher on the Regulatory Improvement Code Amendment Project, or RECAP for short. It is a zoning code maintenance project. It's the 10th such project since 2002. And so, as I said, we'll refresh your memory a little bit with our presentation, remind you of what we talked about at February 27th's hearing, and provide information on the one proposed amendment that we've been notified of from Commissioner Lang. One moment. You're in, and then if I can get my presentation.
He'll need to share a screen. I can't share it either. Or Patricia will need to share a screen. Then I'll get out of the presentation. Thank you for everyone's patience as we get settled here. I see it on my end. Do you not see it?
Okay, sorry about that, folks. All right, so let's move along with recap 10. So a little refresher again on what recap is. Recaps are a little bit different from other legislative code projects in that their purpose is to ease the regulatory burdens and make the code easier to understand and implement while implementing the comprehensive plan. It's an ongoing program of zoning code maintenance, and it addresses a variety of topics and geographies packaged together for efficiency. The focus is on technical and minor policy changes. Larger, medium, and major policy requests, those are assigned to other projects. And our work plan is based on items in an online database, which currently has about 450 items. And we select items out of those based on fair and transparent item selection criteria. So for this project, for recap 10, we have 83 zoning code amendments. There was a backlog, as I mentioned, there's 450 items in the database now. That's a backlog, and so that's why we have 83. It's the largest recap ever. And we selected items that were grouped along themes that are relevant to the moment, namely housing production, economic development, and regulatory reduction. This table just shows the number of policies and how they break down by our themes and subgroups. So we have 29 minor policy changes and 54 technical amendments. This slide just shows a quick summary of our public involvement. We published our proposed draft on January 31st of this year. That included sending a copy of the draft to the project mailing list, which is comprised of approximately 70 interested people and organizations. And of course, we also sent formal notice to the 300 people on our legislative mailing list for the hearing February 27th. Prior to the hearing, you received 7 pieces of written testimony, and as you likely recall, there was one person who testified orally at the hearing. Staff were notified of one proposed amendment to the proposed draft. The amendment is a response to testimony and is further clarification to item number 82, it's a which is conditional use review triggers with allowed uses. The original proposal clarifies when conditional use review is required on sites with both allowed uses and conditional uses. The proposed amendment simply adds the word review in two places to make it clear that reference to development that requires a conditional use is referring to a development that requires a conditional use review. And then this is just the proposal from staff proposes that the Planning Commission recommend to City Council adopt the report, amend Title 33 per the proposed draft as amended, amend policy 2.20 of the comprehensive plan that's related to item 80 and 83, dissolving the adjustment committee. Also to amend the zoning map to remove special street backs along 6 streets, and that's associated with item 75. And then finally repeal 6 ordinances related to those special setbacks, also related to item number 75. Here's our timeline. We're here in winter, spring 2024, looking to go to City Council in May of this year, and an effective date of October 1st of 2024. And that is just the quick refresher I wanted to give you today. I will, unless anyone has anything to add, I'll turn it.
I do have one thing to
Yeah.
add. Thank you, JP. Sandra Wood, Co-Development Manager. I just want to clarify that the amendment that was up on the screen, I believe Commissioner Lang, you were the one who shared that amendment with us, and that's what we sent you on Friday. That would need to be moved and seconded and voted on.
Okay. I'll turn it back to you, Chair O'Meara.
Thank you so much. We can open it up now for discussion and questions from commissioners. Vice Chair Pouncil.
Well, we could dispense of the Commissioner Lang, if you want to move your amendment, we could dispense with that first if we wanted to.
Sure. Go ahead and introduce your amendment, Commissioner Lang.
Okay.
Thank you.
This- Wade Lang, for the record. Like to move to add the amendment just clarified for us as an amendment to recap 10.
We'll go ahead and show that on the slide just so it's clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Routh, I'm happy to second.
Okay.
There it is.
Okay. Is there a second to this amendment?
I think maybe you cannot hear the folks virtually.
There you go.
Okay. Vice Chair Thompson has seconded. So the motion for the amendment is to clarify item number 82, conditional use review triggers with allowed uses. Any discussion on this before we proceed to vote? Okay, Julie, please call roll.
Sure. Alexander,
Aye. Can you not hear me?
Commissioner Alexander, we're not able to hear you. But we see your hand is raised. Can we accept that as
up
the?
a thumbs up. We'll get
Okay,
a thumbs up. Thank you. Lang,
Aye.
Patel,
Aye.
Pouncil,
Aye.
Routh.
Aye. You can't hear me.
Oh, interesting.
That's right.
Steph is also talking and we can't hear.
Okay, Commissioner Routh, you are indicating an aye vote.
Spivak,
Okay, aye vote,
Well, I just checked. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
aye, and O'Meara.
aye. The amendment is approved.
Going on with the,
Yeah, it does look like we're
audio,
having
so we-
audio issues
Can
for
we
Eli
take
and-
our,
a little bit of a
It
break,
sounds
Yeah.
like
Mary,
you
to
can
figure
hear
out?
each other, but
we'll
they
take just a
can't-
short break
That's
to
correct.
figure out audio for our Zoom attendees so that we can have any discussion be more effective, so we can actually hear you all. Okay, that is in process. Give us just a moment.
While we're doing that, I think I'll maybe move my monitor.
I feel like I'm going to blather for a little bit. So anyone at the meeting who can hear this and anyone else,
Eli's trying to talk right now. so-
Eli, you're talking, right?
Yes.
this is a test.
We're
to
just
see if you
talking
can hear
amongst
me.
Okay,
We're
but
just
folks
gonna
online
blah,
can
blah,
clearly
blah.
hear us. Right.
Can you hear each other?
And we can hear each
Yes,
other.
we can hear each other.
Oh,
Can hear each
Okay.
other.
that's nice.
Yeah. I'm not sure what this says for quorum because we have other quorum going on here.
So it's audio through here.
I can play some music on my machine here, and if they hear it in the room.
My Alexa is right here. Just let me know.
Oh yeah,
what
why don't you treat us to some music, Michael? Yeah.
Alexa, play Frank Sinatra and Pavarotti.
Probably because they can hear it in there.
Thank you for the technical support. Okay.
Oh, now that's working. It just. Okay.
Test, test. I think it's good now. I think I just needed to mute my computer. Sorry, everyone. Okay, we are now ready to continue with our schedule here. And we are opening it up to discussion and questions regarding the Recap 10 package as presented to us by staff. And I see Commissioner Spivak, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the song, Commissioner Alexander, for those of us online. I will, at the risk of steering our meeting to be very short, I had a comment, and I think Commissioner Pouncil did too, we did at the last meeting about Amendment 76 in the package, which relates to a port property and others publicly owned that would be river uses, allowing other uses. And I think that I'll just share where I am on this is that I feel like the property where we got a letter in support from the port, I have no issue with that being changed to allow non-river use. In fact, it may already be happening. But as written, it covers additional properties as shown on the map, such that I am left wondering whether it's actually in a minor amendment as drafted. Also recognizing that the EOA, which is ongoing, is sorting out some issues of river use and a general industrial use. So my hope is that we can learn a little bit about this perhaps today, and staff can reach out to the port and people who've been involved from the environmental side in use areas between now and the next meeting, so that we can potentially have a narrower form of this amendment that meets everyone's expectations. If there's stuff the staff can share now, that's great. But my inclination would be to continue this to our next meeting, at which point, hopefully, we can resolve this with the Planning Commission rather than potentially have it go to City Council and have a lot of people get animated and over concerns that is maybe not so minor after all. Thanks.
Commissioner Rouse?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Yes.
It's a wonderful day. Okay. I just thank you, Commissioner Spivak, Commissioner Rouse, for the record. I'm appreciative of Commissioner Spivak for bringing this up, and I am embarrassed because I am on the EOA Collaborative Working Group, and I did not take appropriate note of this. And yes, I do wonder if, especially as we are talking about this in a different, at a different table, whether this is indeed minor, because it does not look so from my perspective. Thank you. Sorry.
Commissioner Lang?
Was there a written testimony from Port of Portland regarding this one?
There was testimony. I don't have it in front of me, but yes, in support of this, and I think explaining a little bit about what they're doing on the property.
Yeah. And maybe we could take a moment, if you don't mind, for JP to explain what the proposal is, so we can all get up to speed on it and get our, be able to participate fully in the discussion, please.
Sure. So we're talking about item number 76, river industrial uses. The proposal is to allow non-river dependent uses in the river industrial zone on sites owned by a public agency and on lots within the site that don't have river frontage. So what the amendment would do, it would allow a public agency to use upland lots on a site in the river industrial the river I zone for non-river dependent uses. The I zone requires lots with river frontage to have a river dependent use on them. And so this would allow a public agency to use upland lots on the same site that are to be used for an industrial use that's allowed in the base zone that isn't river dependent. It sort of hinges on the definition of site and lot. So with this, a site is an ownership. So the port can own multiple lots but it's considered one site. And so the river dependent use is not allowed on the entire site, even if there's multiple lots and some of the lots are set back away from the river. So this in the site is the contiguous ownership of that entire site. So this would allow the river, non-river dependent use on those lots that are not on, don't have river frontage, but are still contained within a public agency, in this case, the port's site. And so this amendment would allow the port to do what a private property owner can do currently. It's something that can and has been done through basically with a PLA, and a private property owner can separate off those lots in a way that a public agency is not able to do. So it allows the port to do what a private property owner can do. And just to this map I've got up here, I don't know how easy it is to see on the slide since I can't really zoom into it, but it's showing publicly owned properties that are in the river I zone. The river I zone is only in the north reach of the river. The port sites are those sites in pink. The one that sort of initiated this proposal is Terminal 2, which is the pink site down here. If you can follow my down here, this is the one site where the port is currently contains a river. On that site, there's a river-dependent use along the river with some ships docked. And then there's also upland of that is an industrial manufacturing use where the port is manufacturing modular homes. So the port has requested a PLA to separate that riverfront lot from the upland lot so that they can have a manufacturing industrial use as allowed under the base zone, but it is not river dependent. And so the rest of the map shows others port-owned properties that are in pink, and then it's hard to see there are some other publicly owned sites that are in purple. There's far fewer of them. Those are sites owned by the city, metro, the state, and the federal government. But the port, this would apply to all publicly owned lands that are in the River I zone. And so that the ones that are flagged are publicly owned sites that are in the River I zone. And just while we're just on this topic, I did want to, one other thing that had come up, if I can get the slide to advance, but not that far. While we're on the topic, there are some questions regarding the public notice and notification for this project. So notice of the proposed draft, formal notice, which is legally required, was mailed to the legislative mailing list, which is certain organizations and persons who have requested such notice. And so there's about 300 people and organizations on that list who received a mailed notice. And that's what the zoning code requires us, notification for this type of legislative project. In addition, for the proposed and discussion draft, we emailed both drafts to our project email list. And so that was just that's a list of organizations and individuals that that are interested in this project or would have some relationship to the project. And that included several environmental and land stewardship groups that we have on that list, including the Audubon Society, Oregon Environmental Council, the Oregon League of Conservation Voters, and 1,000 Friends of Oregon. So those are organizations that we did send the proposal to at the time that the drafts were released. I'll bring it back to the map.
JP, can I just, this is Patricia Diefenhofer for the record, just add, I think JP used an acronym PLA. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that that's a property line adjustment. And so once again, it is a question of the definitions of the code, site versus lot. You have site is the full ownership. Lot you can have multiple lots in that ownership. And this would allow the ability for public agencies to do something that private property owners currently can do, which is to, do a property line adjustment or separate their lot and still have river-dependent uses on the river fronting lot and be able to more fully use their industrial site more intensively by potentially having other industrial uses in the upland portion of the site that is not river fronting. And also, it's very important to be clear that there's nothing about this that changes any other regulations. So the underlying zoning remains industrial. The allowed uses remain those that are allowed in the industrial zone. It does not change any of the other regulations related to site, any site planning or environmental protections that might be that also govern that location or those locations. So just want to make sure that's very, very clear about what this does and does not do. And happy to answer any additional questions that the commission might have.
Vice Chair Thompson?
Thank you. I just wanted to doubly clarify to make sure I understand how this would apply. So currently, if a public agency has 2 lots and one is upland and one is river fronting, they cannot, the upland one is bound by the river uses. What is before us today would revise that so that the upland lot is only subject to the base and whatever other zoning map overlays exist. And then also,
That's correct.
if they had a single lot that was river fronting, they would presumably be able to go through a PLA process, beholden to whatever criteria and the approval criteria are for the PLA process to carve out an upland parcel. And if they go through that process, then they would then be able to.
Actually, no, for a property line adjustment, you need to have more than one lot. So that's just simply to adjust the line between 2 existing lots. It may be possible to do a land division, but you would have to go through the land division process to divide the lot.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
And each of those have their processes, right? So also to be clear that this just allows the possibility, and then the applications, any proposal would have to go through its own review process.
Commissioner Lang?
What was the reasoning that public ownership couldn't do this and private could?
It's simply a matter of a private entity can create a separate LLC and transfer ownership of that lot. So it's not in the same ownership, and so it's no longer part of this site because it's under a separate ownership. And the port is not able to create LLCs and transfer property to that.
Vice Chair Pouncil?
Thanks for explaining that and having us revisit the image again and understand, what is happening with item number 76. I guess the concerns that I have with this is that there has and I understand. My concern with this is that there has been a history of a request for more industrial lands, and I understand that this is that request is happening in the river industrial area in North Portland, and I understand that this is we are wanting to divide the land, upland from the river dependent area for other uses, and I think that that's great if we want to do that for T2 to be done, but having this to be done for all of this public land owned by the port. With this change, I feel like it's a little premature. While we have, there's like real thoughtful deliberation that is happening with folks in the EOA right now in those meetings, and I think it's important to honor that time that those folks are spending to talk about this, and that there could be some other way that we could go about making sure that this use for this area is being used for what it needs to be used for in the present, while the deliberation for all of these sites are happening right now. And I also think it's important to honor Gold 9 on this as well, and that this is a big change on the dependence of industrial land. I, in my opinion, from living in the area and being familiar with these sites as well. I don't know, there's just something weird about me doing this while we know that folks are talking about this within the EOA.
Commissioners, if it's all right with you, I'd like to address that point. First, and pardon, and if you all have anything, please feel free to jump in, but wanted to first clarify that even though you see these various sites on the map, this doesn't automatically change property lines, right? I just want to make sure it's very clear that all this does is create the opportunity that if a public agency wanted to, has separate property lines or wanted to create separate property lines to do different activities on their overall site, their ownership, that they could do so. So it doesn't automatically do this to every parcel. Just want to make sure that's really clear. As to the matter of the EOA, the Economic Opportunities Analysis, and the conversations that are happening there, I would say this, the EOA is taking up a lot of different issues related to employment lands. The main function of the EOA is to forecast what the needed jobs, the job growth is through 2045, and then understand what the land availability is to accommodate those jobs. So the jobs generally range from, kind of office, institutional, your basic kind of retail that you typically find on our main streets and our commercial corridors of the city office. Of course, we have the central city and other areas that have office space, and we have our campuses and our institutional uses. Industrial is the other main type of employment use. And in the Economic Opportunities Analysis, the information that we have thus far, there's land capacity to accommodate all the different kinds of uses, except for industrial land. There is, the findings of the initial analysis show that there's still industrial land to grow into, but there isn't enough industrial land to accommodate all of the projected industrial jobs in 2045. So without making, some investments in the things that are constraining the industrial land. So those kinds of things are brownfield remediation, their infrastructure. There's some constraints to use of some of the industrial land because of infrastructure constraints. And then there's also, frankly, the Superfund, right? And the Superfund site, and of which so a lot of this area is within the Superfund site. The working out of the terms of those agreements is also something that has long factored into how people are using these industrial properties. So there are many different constraints that are, that exist currently. Also, in conjunction with all of that, the EOA process that we're going through is also looking at what the environmental kind of considerations are along these this portion of the river as it relates to natural resource protection and floodplain regulation. So the reason I give you all this background is because there's a lot of different issues and there's a lot of different factors that are affecting how people are able to use these sites currently. And there's a lot of different constraints. And so in that context, there is this opportunity for the city to use more intensely this site that has not had very intense use for a long time, and to use it for something that is fulfilling or addressing a high priority of the city, which is housing production. And so even while this and many other aspects of what to do with our industrial land in the future and how to approach industrial land and accommodation of industrial jobs is going on, this is dealing with kind of an immediate real world issue that has come up. And again, it is just allowing publicly owned land, public agencies to do something that, frankly, as we have said, private property owners can do today. And so while we don't want to, be too expansive in this sort of what you might consider more of an interim move, it is an important thing. It's an important priority for the city, and we're really trying to find a path forward for this now, knowing that the economic opportunities analysis conversation is going to attempt to address this issue in the context of all the other related issues that I was describing for the commission. So I just want you to be aware of the complexity and the time that might take, right? We have a schedule that would put us having this come to commission and council by the end of the year, but the truth of the matter is, it really depends on a lot of these issues and what we can work through in that given time. So I'll leave it at that, but I hope that additional information gives you some additional context for why this item is part of this package right now.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia, for that context. So I'm just bringing it back to recap 10. Maybe this can help you navigate the things that you're hearing about. So the zoning code amendment that JP shared does apply to all those colored properties on the map, the big port properties that are in pink, and then there's some purple ones that are owned by other entities. But in actuality, we think that the amendment itself would only affect that southernmost terminal, which has been underutilized for many, many years, and that this amendment would allow for that manufacturing use on the upland portion of the site, which is actually already being used in that warehouse fashion to manufacture prefab housing that is going all over the state of Oregon. So our position was this doesn't have really greater implications for those other properties, and that's why we proposed it during recap. So I think if you agree with that, then no amendment is needed. If you don't agree with that and you're concerned that there could be other implications for these other properties, then you can direct us to come back later, like Commissioner Spivak was discussing at the beginning of this segment, for a more targeted approach. I think those are the two options.
Thank you, Patricia and Sandra, for that additional context. I believe Commissioner Spivak, you had your hand up first, and then Commissioner Routh.
Thank you. Well, I've learned stuff from this already. It's great. I didn't know that public agencies were challenged by site-based criteria because they can't split up ownership and create entities. I'm still the thought that I would be inclined to, I think that there's a solution here that could come from staff talking to the port and talking to William River Keepers and bringing back a narrower proposal in 2 weeks that would be something that we could easily support, and that would also spare City Council from having a lot of environmental groups make it into a big issue of City Council that doesn't need to be. So I think that there's probably a path forward. So that's my inclination on this. I hear that like the port's already using these other properties, but sometimes there's trust issues. And I think that it would be a chance to sort that out ahead of City Council rather than at City Council.
Okay, Commissioner Routh.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Routh, for the record. And where to begin? So what I'm hearing is, and I appreciate this time and that context, Patricia and Sandra, and what I'm hearing is that actually like the site requirements are the same for private and public entities. It's just that the private entities have a workaround that public entities do not, and that is to sell off the parcel to another LLC. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Okay, so it, and what I am hearing is also that this is specifically for Terminal 2, or an issue around T2 that would also impact other parcels or other sites, but T2 is the issue that we're talking about right now. Is that correct?
That's correct too.
Okay. Thank you. And so what is, I'm just curious, like, and I'm going to ask a few other questions just so that I can understand if that's okay.
Sure.
More about, okay. I'm so sorry also not to be in your physical presence. I did not today well. So I
And
regret
somehow I
that
feel
we're
like
having
I'm
this-
being interrogated.
Yes, this is why it would feel so much better if I was there in person. So I'm so sorry.
We're
I'm
good,
just
we're
trying to
good, Commissioner
understand.
Roth,
Okay. But so what is the timeline for the need of T2? Because I'm hearing that there is some need. I believe I know what the specific use is for the modular manufacturer, which sounds really exciting. And in talking about affordable housing, like big fan. But so I'm curious, what is the timeline for that, and is there a workaround? Like, is there a way to scope this so that it is site specific as an option?
Well, I think that's what Commissioner Spivak was
Okay.
sharing with us, or saying, like, that's what his inclination was, to have us go and think about this and work with others, and bring back a proposed amendment at the next meeting.
Commissioner
would
Ralph,
it-
just to answer the question of timing, I mean, I think timing is, I mean, it is of the essence for this use currently. So while we can certainly take another, meeting to bring back something that's a little bit more refined and tailored, this is something that we do have to kind of move along to council in the near term.
Great. And that brings me to my last question, which is, I know it's not normal, but is there an opportunity here to advance the rest of the package and today and suggest take this one out as a potential amendment to tack on? I'm just trying to think of like how to do it in a way that doesn't that allows the rest of the process, because there are, as JP said, this is the largest recap. We have a lot of things to clean up, and I don't want to burden that process. And also, we want to make sure that we're not causing harm to Commissioner Pouncel's worthy comments.
Yeah.
And then I will
Thank
stop.
you so much for thinking about that. We're aiming, or we're targeting, and we're kind of committed to an October 1st deadline. Remember, City Council passed a resolution for the March 1st and October 1st. So regardless of how much time we take, if we come back to the next meeting in 2 weeks, it doesn't delay us at all. I would suggest we keep the whole package together.
Vice Chair Thompson, go ahead.
Hi, I was wondering if staff could speak a little bit to the origin of the single site, single owner definition and why that exists in the first place. I feel like it's getting at something, like there's a reason why it is worded that way and why that is the requirement. And either there's a loophole that allows privately owned parcels to find a workaround. Maybe that's the secondary point, but I'm just trying to understand like how this came about.
So Shannon Buno with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Unfortunately, I don't know the history behind that particular definition. It's been in the code since 1991 when our code was revised. It may well have been the definition in the zoning code prior to 1991 as well. But the term site is used throughout the code. Primarily as a way to ensure that the whole site is taken into consideration when we're talking about FAR and setbacks and building coverage and things like that. In this case, it's used because the North Reach part of the river area has been preserved since 1987 for harbor-dependent uses. And so, you know, that's why that term is used in that particular context.
But it's also, just for the record, Patricia, it's also used in many other contexts in the code, right? So just to be clear about that, it's definitions, you know, just ways to talk about partitions of land, whether it's site or lot. And sometimes, you know, these words are somewhat used interchangeably. In the code, they are defined and they have a certain meaning. And changing that definition would impact so many sections of the code. So
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That gets at it. I guess I was wondering if we are undoing something that by design was trying to protect these sites in some unique fashion for river uses. And it sounds like, no, this is just a broad, definition. So thank you. And then I guess I had another question just to other commissioners. It seems like there was a sense that if there was an environmental drawback to this revision as it stands, maybe that would have escaped the radar of environmental groups because of the size of the recap package. And so understanding that testimony is closed, I'm just curious to understand if folks have an awareness of whether or not this is on the radar of groups, if you're hearing from people offline. On the one hand, I totally agree with the question and the intent and the need to address this, but we also have testimony that's been closed, and so I'm just kind of grappling with making amendments when there's not a lot of testimony related to the environmental protection side of things to draw upon.
Commissioner, I might just start by saying that I personally have not heard any feedback from environmental groups necessarily on this. I'm not sure if we've heard anything other than sort of the conversation that's going on here. So I think that's important for the commission to be aware of. It's not to say that it won't come up at council. I certainly am not saying that, but I'm just saying that I don't think we're hearing a clamor. Like, we know you've been through processes where you see when there's a lot of testimony and there's and it's coming in at a pretty good pace, and I don't think we're not seeing that here.
Vice Chair Council.
I think there's been a long ongoing stand with many environmental groups that there has been a deficit of tree cover and concern with runoff in the industrial area. There's also a concern too about making sure that if any of these changes happen, that those protections are also kind of written into place as well. That that could possibly exist in any type of amendment that we could improve the tree cover and be strategic about source pollution going into the Willamette. So there has been an overall concern for that for a long time. Now I don't obviously it wasn't in the public comment, but I would like to just go back and say that I have reservations about moving into this quickly, because I do think that there possibly are things that we're missing. We don't have the time to actually sit here and deliberate about, and it would be, I think, in good fashion to possibly, move this package forward with, leaving the code as it stands with the carve out for T2 to be able to keep doing the production work for building modular homes and at that site. So I think that Commissioner Spivak's approach, I think sounds, I think it sounds reasonable for us to move in that direction versus then doing this and having all of the parcels, all of those sites go under what's been put forward, because we just haven't had really careful deliberation about it. And I just, believe that, that's what folks on the EOA are doing. That's what they're doing now. So that's kind of my position on it.
Chair O'Mara, for the record, I have a question related back to the EOA scope of work, and I don't know who to direct this to. But I guess I'm reflecting on why greater flexibility of land use would not lead to more economic opportunity and job creation. And so if there is, any sort of resistance or deliberation emerging at the EOA, I'm confused about, or I would like more information about what is the nature. Is it tied to the environmental concerns? If that body is scoped with looking at economic opportunity, it seems like this change would, in fact, open up more flexibility for different types of job creation.
Commissioners, I can take a first stab at answering that question, and then if others have inputs, that would be great. So yes, I think this is the thing that I want to keep us coming back to and focused on, is that this does not change the underlying uses, the underlying zoning, right? And it doesn't really impact whatever conversations are happening. Those conversations will continue to happen. And there's to your point, Chair O'Mara, this does in fact create more opportunity for a wider range of uses by doing this. I think that the environmental, if I could characterize what I understand to be the concerns on the part of environmental community, is that any industrial land that is sort of taken out of industrial use, for example, puts more pressure on the land that is there. And what you have along the river, the industrial areas of the river, is you have the convergence of the industrial land and the jobs, considerations with the environmental resources, right? And so I think, generally speaking, I can say from being in those meetings firsthand that folks among the environmental community tend to want to protect industrial land, so that when we have a conversation around, is there an opportunity to, expand environmental zones, for example, along the river, that, because that effectively kind of impacts the ability to have the industrial uses or industrial operations in those areas that are overlain with the environmental zone. So protecting environmental lands in sort of upland areas can maybe relieve some of the pressure, so that there could be some additional room for environmental considerations along the riverbanks itself. And I think that's the nature of the conversation. But again, this doesn't change any of that, right? It doesn't change the land from industrial use to some other use. It's just there's offering some greater flexibility in the types of uses across the entirety of the site.
Thank you so much for that clarification. So to summarize where I think we are, go ahead, Commissioner Routh.
Thank you, Commissioner Routh. As your commission liaison to the Economic Opportunity Analysis Collaborative Working Group, I just want to add on to what Patricia just said, that some of the conversations, I would say that the folks around that table currently, I would put as, there's obviously us, there's labor, developers, agencies, and environmental considerations, because around a lot of our industrial lands, particularly the ones like North Reach and Columbia Corridor, are important both for industrial and for environmental protection. And so, like, looking at what that tension is, and how do we how do we think about some of our zones and our codes in a way that ideally lifts all boats, and that we assure that they are working on economic prosperity in harmony with nature. So with some of the things we've talked about are revisiting like E zones and P zones, which have come before this body before. We're talking about most recently Title 11 around tree codes. So I do think that there is that interplay. And a couple of questions. We were supposed to finish the collaborative working group last month, but we recognize that we have some more conversation to do because there are a lot of issues. One of the questions, what is a good job? Is what is a thriving economic opportunity is a question I think that we have a real interest in identifying and building a shared understanding around. And another is, what does an economic opportunity mean in this space we are at? Does vertical, I've heard from a few folks, like what does vertical industrial land look like? And recognizing also that while we are talking about this at the City of Portland, this is a regional conversation because Goal 10 for economic opportunities is a regional look at buildable lands. And so the conversation that we're having is from the City of Portland's perspective, what are the buildable lands that we have? And so then we can take it to the region conversation and see, how does this fit within the regional puzzle for economic opportunity? So I do feel that this conversation, I might differ with others, but I feel that this conversation that we're having around item number 76 is substantive and related to the EOA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Routh. So to summarize where I think we are, and I'll ask Commissioner Spivak or another member of the commission who would like to make this request, but there is a request to staff to do some additional outreach to potentially impacted groups in the next 2 weeks and come back to the commission at our next meeting, I believe that's March 26th, with a summary of that outreach. Is that the extent of the request? I haven't heard an amendment proposal, so I just want to clarify that we're not at the point of an amendment proposal. There's a request for more information and outreach. Is that correct, Commissioner Spivak?
That's I think the key groups are the Port of Portland and Willamette River Keepers. And I would be happy to not just the outreach, but hear a recommendation for a amendment that both those groups would agree to. That would be a great outcome. I think it's worth trying.
Okay, so the intent would be to have a member of commission introduce an amendment for the March 26th agenda, specific to item number 76, okay?
What, did you say that both groups propose an amendment? I'm sorry.
Can I just help maybe
I
clarify
think
a
it would be
little bit?
staff,
Yeah.
staff bringing an amendment to us after consulting with those groups that would
Yes.
be. We could try to make an amendment right now, but I fear that that's not a good idea to do on the fly.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping for a narrower amendment, a narrower version of, so an amendment to the proposed draft that narrows number 76 such that those parties find it supportive.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So I would just like to take another moment to open it up if there are any additional discussion regarding this request and direction. Commissioner Patel, go ahead.
Yeah, this isn't directly related to that request. It's a clarifying question that I have with recent state legislation on housing that was passed on the topic of flexibility of land uses. And I recall that there was a Senate bill that was passed to allow housing on industrial lands as of right for lands owned by public agencies. Now, does item 76, is it in harmony with that? Is to be in compliance with that state law, or is there No relation.
So there are many bills that were passed during the short legislative session, and we're taking a look at them, methodically and determining what our compliance is going to be on each of them. In this case, it would be like housing itself, so it would be like apartments being built on industrial land, I believe. I'm not sure all the nuances of that, but this isn't, the units that are being produced on this site are being manufactured to be sent elsewhere. The housing isn't occurring on that site. So we'll definitely take a look at the bill so that we can come into compliance with it, but I don't believe it would change anything on
This has
this
no
property.
effect. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Vice Chair Council.
Yes, I would just like there to be more considerate, maybe thought and deliberation about carve out of this particular site so that we can move forward. And then, I think we should let the EOA committee do their job and have real thoughtful, deep, deliberation about the broader impact of those other sites and how we should move forward with those. But I think it's important that we focus on T2 and move forward with that.
Chair O'Meara, for the record, I'm curious when the next opportunity would be, because I do just really want to emphasize the economic opportunities piece here. And if we are looking at the EOA to really take this further with more deliberation, when would there be a window of opportunity to bring this back to commission?
Commissioner, Chair O'Meara, Patricia Diefender first. So I want to be sure. I think what I'm hearing, certainly from Commissioner Spivak and from Vice Chair Council, is direction that staff go back and do a little bit more investigation to come back with an amendment that would apply this change more narrowly. And I think that we're happy if that's the direction that the commission is leaning towards. We're happy to take that instruction back and do that and bring that back to our next meeting. So the March 26th meeting. I think it's really important for us to keep this package as a whole and to move this particular provision along with the rest of the package. The broader issues that were raised up here of the EOA, they will have their process and they will come to this commission in due course. I would really urge the commission to continue to take the approach of finding a solution for this situation right now. And if that means looking at writing the provision in such a way that it's more narrowly applicable, we're happy to go back and look at that and do that.
Thank you. I think my question was related to if we do a carve out, would there be a future opportunity to revisit and see if that exclusion of those additional sites have actually limited economic opportunity?
Certainly, whatever we end up doing with this provision here in this package, when we bring the EOA back, I mean, the intention is that a lot of these broader issues about all of it, right, and including the need for the river industrial, the river related, river dependent, all of that is something that we're going to have recommendations for in the EOA. So if for any reason, things are different from those discussions, I think that would be the time and the opportunity to reflect on that.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Any additional? Yes, Commissioner Lang.
Just, you did outreach, and I don't recall any negative testimony to number 76. I recall the Port of Portland's testimony. So when you go back out there, are you going to talk specifically about site-specific rather than all of that publicly owned? And if there's no feeling from those other groups that's really, they don't care, you could come back to us with exactly what's on there right now based on feedback or lack of feedback that you might get from them.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think what we're being asked to do is like to verify what we believe is true, which is that while the code amendment affects all those colored properties on the maps, that the implications in actuality and the outcome would only affect T2. And so I think what we're being asked to do is to go verify that and have those conversations with Willamette River Keepers and the port in particular, and bring that back.
And is it possible to create a site-specific amendment for that? Because what we're doing right now is saying that the publicly owned sites can do that wherever they have that condition. And now we're saying that there's only one site. Is that
We'll work
okay
on
to do that way?
We'll make it more targeted, and we'll figure out how to narrow it if we need to.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Vice Chair Thompson, go ahead.
To that point, I wonder if additional engagement with the port or other agencies would be warranted, because as you all have described, this really just affects T2 currently. That's the characterization, and we don't really have any reason to believe otherwise based on the testimony. And I did just go back and look at the port's testimony, which I think was just provided on the discussion draft. And it's very short, you know, and it talks about increased flexibility in jobs. It's like one paragraph, but there really isn't any context. And so is there another side where we're missing out on future flexibility by narrowing the scope too much? And I think to Wade's point, if the environmental groups that we follow up with are like, we don't have concerns about this more broadly when we look at all of the pink areas on the map, understanding that there's really only one site currently, but hypothetically, if other projects, you know, came down in the future, then are we just creating kind of another headache or future issue for ourselves when, you know, if we can get everybody to agree, can we just keep it as is? That's the question I have.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Vice Chair Thompson. And that seems like the decision that will need to be made at the next meeting in terms of what the outcome of the additional outreach is and what the decision of commission is in terms of reviewing any potentially proposed amendment.
Chair O'Meara, just to clarify process, like our typical process is based on this request, you've asked us to go do a little more investigation, and depending on what we've learned from that investigation, to potentially propose an amendment that would apply more narrowly. And just to be clear, I mean, I think the commission understands why we tend to try to write these things in such a way that it's not just targeting one site typically, but because that's kind of viewed as better zoning practice. But in this case, we would probably work through an amendment, draft an amendment that we would share in advance as we typically do, right? We would, based on the conversations of what we learned, we would offer up a suggestion for what that amendment would be. We would share it in advance, and that's what would be before the commission at the next meeting. So I just want to make sure that procedurally everyone is tracking with that.
Thank you, Patricia. That makes sense to me. Any follow-up questions regarding process and the next steps here?
And just to further clarify, we would not be opening that amendment up for public testimony.
Okay. I don't see indications for additional comments, so we will proceed with that request and direction to staff and revisit this item at the March 26th Planning Commission meeting. And I think that takes us to the end of our meeting today, so I will adjourn us. Thank you all so much.
There was no other amendments that we had to.
No, that was it. Yeah. Yep.